Well, we have a 5-Sunday month this July, so I thought it would be a great opportunity to revisit and review what have come to be known as our 5 basic unity principles. So today we're on the second principle, which in its original form, and these were compiled by Charles and Myrtle's great-granddaughter, Connie Fillmore Bozzi. This is the way she wrote the second principle. Human beings have a spark of divinity within them, the Christ Spirit within. Their very essence is of God, and therefore they are also inherently good. Okay, that's pretty good. I think that's an accurate statement as far as it goes, but as always, and that's what these principles are meant to do, they're meant to keep us thinking, they're meant to get us questioning. And the question it raised for me the first time I read this was that word spark. I thought, a spark, huh? Is that all there is? And I'll tell you, when Karen and I were in ministerial school, we had some instructors who had the same question. And you get to thinking about it, a spark. Well, first of all, it's like a spark that can never be extinguished. And I think it's a pretty good analogy, especially when you live in wildfire country like we do out here. We all know how powerful a spark can be, especially under the right conditions. We almost lost North Auburn back in 2009 after a spark caused a wildfire in an area that didn't appear to be heavily wooded, but all it took was a spark, dry brush, and the right wind conditions, and you can get an inferno that, well, it can level an entire subdivision. A spark is enough, no doubt. And then it's up to us to take that and to kindle it into something that's more powerful and especially benevolent. Human beings are inherently good in the sense that it's one of the possibilities that's open to us. Compassion, empathy, love, justice, altruism, all exist within the realm of human consciousness if we choose to make it so. I think this is another great example of how the Unity movement was such a subversive voice back in the late 1800s. Our co-founders, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, they flatly rejected the prevailing view of humankind that was being promoted by traditional Christian doctrine. It was a very negative view of human nature, and so they were rebelling against that viewpoint. The doctrine that was popular back then was called Calvinism, something that was invented in the 1500s by this French theologian named John Calvin. This guy was a religious extremist. He started what was called the Reformed Church that eventually became the Presbyterian Church. I'm happy to say that the Presbyterian Church of today has very little in common with the worst of John Calvin, but this guy believed that he spoke for God. And just to give you an idea of how much of an unpleasant character he was, he supported the burning of heretics for blasphemy. This is from a letter that he wrote on the subject. He said, "Whoever shall now contend that it is unjust to put heretics and blasphemers to death will knowingly and willingly incur their very guilt." In other words, if you say it's wrong to burn heretics and blasphemers, you're just as guilty as they are. All right, that's what he's saying there. And then he says, this is not laid down on human authority. No, it's not me saying this. It is God who speaks and prescribes a perpetual rule for his church. Many people have accused me of such ferocious cruelty that I would like to kill again the man that I have destroyed. This was a particular heretic that he hounded to death and was eventually burned at the stake. And he says, not only am I indifferent to their comments, but I rejoice in the fact that they spit in my face. I rejoice in the fact. Yeah. This is not a this is not a well person. Would you agree? So the whole core of his doctrine that swept Christianity back in those days is that the essential nature of humanity is corrupt, utter, and complete depravity. Human beings were capable of doing nothing good of their own volition. The only way that human beings could possibly do anything that would be described as good would be for God to pull the puppet strings and cause them to do it. But of our own, nothing. So, one more little gem from John Calvin, just to give you an idea of what he really thought. If God had formed us of the stuff of the sun or the stars, or if he had created any other celestial matter out of which man could have been made, then we might have said that our beginning was honorable. But we are all made of mud. And this mud is not just on the hem of our gown or on the sole of our boots or in our shoes. We are full of it. We are nothing but mud and filth, both inside and outside.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. What a great theological statement to arouse the people to a sense of joyous enthusiasm about their lives. Could you imagine the look on his face if he were here today, if John Calvin were here today, and could hear Carl Sagan say that we are star stuff?
Whoa.
Think about that. How could he have possibly been so wrong? Well, because they didn't know much of anything back then. We know today, to a very high degree of certainty, that contrary to what the esteemed John Calvin had to say, we are indeed formed of the stuff of the sun or the stars. We're carbon-based life forms, and the carbon that we're made from was forged in the stars. And so he starts that whole thing off with just a complete misunderstanding of exactly who we are. He'd have been apoplectic today. He'd have found some way to deny it, I'm sure. He clearly didn't know what he was talking about. And so today we can and should rightly regard his work as the ranting of a fanatical, power-hungry ignoramus. Bye-bye. I don't want to put all the blame on John Calvin, though, because he was really just parroting Catholic doctrine from St. Augustine. That was the person who developed the concept of original sin. It's just Calvin took it over the top. He kicked it up a few notches, as somebody once said. Original sin. Imagine going to church on a pleasant Sunday morning and being told that you better hurry up and make sure that horrible little sin-filled newborn baby gets baptized ASAP so he or she will be saved. I just don't know how they got people, well, anyway. Original sin. Unity don't believe in it. We don't believe in original sin, we believe in original blessing. We want to tell the world that it is a wonderful and awe-inspiring thing to be born human and to have the potential to do the kind of good in the world that we know that we are all capable of. That was the subversive message of Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. No original sin, original blessing. The nature of humankind is something positive, not negative. Positive in the sense that, yes, we can and are capable of doing great things and great good in the world. So, a few years ago, and I think I shared this before, there is a T-shirt, a wonderful T-shirt that says something rather interesting. Do I have it up here? There we are. Ever see this on a T-shirt? You are the result of 3.8 billion years of evolutionary success. Act like it. And I have seen some T-shirts that put it a little more colorfully than that, but you get the idea. And this is essentially what Unity is trying to tell the world, that there is something awesome and something that is very deliberate about how we have evolved to be able to do the kinds of wonderful things. We're the result of billions of years of evolution, the same process, the same principle that gave rise to this universe and everything in it brought us into being. Now, I think maybe we can probably see a little bit about where Calvin and St. Augustine were coming from, because you can look around and see plenty of evidence that people are not always good. But they're not always evil either. Depends on what you choose to focus on. Get the big picture and you know that we are capable of greatness. So what is the reality? Well, it's not totally good. It's not totally depraved. That's what being a truth student is all about, is being willing to look at that and come to some kind of a conclusion that doesn't involve some kind of a silly platitude. Charles and Myrtle, they didn't come to give us platitudes. The big picture here is that we are all made of the same stuff. Our source and our essence of all of us is the same. So let's take a look at how we reworded the first principle that we talked about last week. The first principle goes like this: God is the name that we give to the source and essence of all that is. There is no other enduring power. Emphasis on the word all. The source and essence of all that is. And so if that's true